Welcome back to the third season of Reconfiguring Reality. Today we are going to be discussing mental health rights. I am Laura,
I'm the Jericho.
and we have guests with us today.
I'm Krista.
And I'm Brother Nichols.
Let's get into it. We're going to talk about mental health rights in the United States because I'm not familiar with anything outside of the United States. Just want to
Sounds good. Yeah.
point that
Well,
out.
I don't know anything outside of the US.
All right, we asked Kristen to join us today because she works in mental health. Do you not? What
Yes,
do
I
you
do.
do?
I am a therapist.
And therapists are different than psychologists, psychiatrists. You cannot prescribe meds, right?
I cannot prescribe meds, which psychiatrists do, and a psychologist is just a different kind of degree than the one that I have.
Okay. Is it lesser or more
It's
school?
more.
Oh. Are you gonna do it?
No. No, I'm just
Okay.
working on my licensure, and then that'll be it. And I'm almost
Okay.
there, one more year.
All right. So, what kind of mental health rights do humans get in the medical industry right now?
So, I mean, right now, people are entitled, they have the right to mental health treatment at the lowest level necessary. So, if you're just like having a rough time, you're having some depression and anxiety and just need someone to talk to, you are entitled to outpatient therapy. Um, if you find that you need something a little more intensive, then you could go to intensive outpatient therapy. But you get the lowest level of care required by your needs. And that is a right that everyone has. Um, you have a right to be seen by a psychiatrist for medication management, even just to talk to a psychiatrist just to see what meds would help and is this the route I want to take. Um, One of the big surprises, and I know this is for Pennsylvania, I'm not sure across like the entire nation, but in Pennsylvania, kids at the age of 14 have the right to make their own mental health decisions. So they can sign for their own treatment. They can choose to quit treatment if they want. They can choose to start treatment if they want. Sometimes you'll get a kid who wants to be in therapy and mom and dad aren't really on board with it, but they're 14. So they find a way to get in touch with a therapist and get therapy. Um, and that's like a big difference between that and physical, like medical health rights. You still have to be 18 for medical rights, but at 14, you can sign your own stuff and take more control over your treatment.
Which I thought was crazy when I was in the medical field in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the fence about it. Just because there's such a wide range of maturity at age 14. Um, some kids can totally take charge of their mental health at 14. They've got, they're self-aware, they've got a good head on their shoulders, they know they do their research. My own kid was like that. They wanted to try Prozac when they were like 15 or 16. I wasn't crazy about it, but I couldn't tell them no. But they did their research, made sure they understood everything that was going on with it, tried it for a little while, it didn't really help, so they stopped taking it under the direction of a psychiatrist. But then I know some 14-year-olds that I wouldn't trust them to make a peanut butter sandwich, let alone make a decision about their mental health. So for me, it's kind of rough. It does make, I will say, it does make my sessions with my teenagers a little bit easier because I don't have to call mom or dad back to sign for their encounters. They can sign for themselves. And sometimes they appreciate that because they don't want mom or dad coming back. So,
Yeah, my personal take on it is I think they need to treat it like they treat emancipation. I think there needs to be some sort of evaluation process that says, is this person competent? Are they mature? Are they well adjusted? Are they in the right mental state to make those calls for themselves? Because people are so easily influenced now and so bombarded by things like social media and peer pressure that oftentimes they are convinced in the way that a child is convinced they want to be an astronaut on Tuesday, that a particular course of action in their life is the right thing to do, and then they make irreversible decisions or dangerous decisions that later in life have serious repercussions, right? Something you can't just easily walk back because you decide later on that maybe this wasn't the right way to go with it, right? And just giving them carte blanche because you're saying, okay, well, they should have some sort of self autonomy. Well, there's a reason why we don't let kids play with fire, right? It's not about personal freedom, it's about safety. If they're not mature enough or responsible enough to handle certain decisions, you don't just simply take the training wheels off because, hey, we don't want to stifle their creativity or individuality, right? And I think that's where that argument needs to have a serious conversation where, if in some instances, for example, right, if you have somebody who's struggling with things like body dysmorphia, or they're getting bullied, or they're dealing with gender politics at their school, and they need someone that they can confide in and talk to. Maybe they have a bad household, or they don't have a safe place to talk to, right? They're going to need some place they can go and confide in without the fear of reprisal. So a system like this is great for that. But then on the other side of things, if they don't know any better, if they're getting pressured by someone or coerced by somebody in the worst case of scenarios, right? And their parents are completely blind to this, not because they're inattentive, but this person's being manipulated by some outseen force, they would have no idea. And because the child has full autonomy at this point over their own records, and like in California, even medical records to some degree at a certain age, right? They leave themselves open to predators and to people who are looking to do them harm. And we've essentially allowed this to happen, and there's no one really looking out for them. There's no one protecting them at that point because we just assume they're making these decisions completely free of their own volition and with the right mindset, right? So I think there's something to be said about that because there's still places in our country where adults are their own mental states are calling into question whether or not they can check themselves out of a facility, right? So why are we allowing children who, and it's kind of like the same thing without going too far off topic, but like, why can we send children to war, right? You turn 18, we'll ship you off and let you fight in war, but you can't get a beer. You can't rent a
Right.
hotel room. Like, right?
Right.
Like these kind of morality things are kind of stupid when you compare them against one another. But even though we think of war and things as violent and extreme and whatnot, if you've ever been in the military or grown up with the military, you'll know that everything is so strict and rigid, you're really not even though you're doing incredibly violent and sometimes complicated things, you're still not an adult in what you would consider to be a traditional sense. Like when a lot of these young kids who come back from the military, having spent the first like 4 or 5 years of their life there, they don't come back as fully well-adjusted adults a lot of times. They still come back as kids who just now really don't fit in society any better than they did when they left. In fact, sometimes even in some cases, they're almost institutionalized, similar to prisoners that have been in for a long time because they're used to being told what to do. And now they've been given this immense amount of freedom and expected to behave themselves and conduct themselves in a world that expects them to know rules and laws and procedures, where before they were told how to do everything. And now they're just supposed to have this innate knowledge that they weren't prepared for. And they end up you know, getting themselves in trouble because not because they're inherently bad, but they just simply weren't prepared. You know what I mean? So I
Hmm.
think under that same idea, mental health can be, a very dangerous landscape when we simply take, uh, too much, restriction or too much guidance off of it and allow them to just sort of wander aimlessly.
Well, and you also have situations like what I dealt with as an adolescent. I remember at the age of around 13, 14, I ended up getting in some trouble. And so I was actually court ordered to go see to have therapy and go see a psychiatrist. It wasn't of my mom's volition. It wasn't of my volition. It was of the volition of the courts. So the courts, the system itself has somewhat power over you to choose what to do with your life without you having any say so in it.
Right.
Repeat
I
that.
used to work in child welfare, and a lot of times the parents would be court ordered to engage in therapy of some sort, whether it's individual or like the families are told they have to do, like it's court ordered, they have to do family therapy. So, like, while like people do have the right to choose, sometimes that right is kind of squashed a little because of choices that they've made that have led them to a situation where a judge is saying, nope, you need to get it together before we can make any, decisions about where your kids live or anything like that.
Krista, as an advocate in the field, what kind of organizations do you use to get assistance in your, uh, I don't know, to facilitate the kind of help that people need? Do you use organizations or anything like that?
So I work for an agency that provides a lot of different kinds of resources. We provide psychiatry, both pediatric and adult. We provide intensive outpatient therapy for adults. We provide outpatient therapy, both school based and in the office, for children through adults. Um, we have a lot of autism resources. Like we have an entire section of our agency that just focuses on autistic folks and helping them with whatever resources they need from kids to adults. We have a DAS program, which is a residential program for mental health. We have an apartment building that's low income that some of our clients live in. We have a food pantry. We provide a lot of resources just within our agency. Right now, we're kind of struggling with pediatric psychiatry. We just had a nurse leave, so we're short staffed. And so there's this big long wait list. So whenever we make a referral for a kid to go to psychiatry, they will call and connect them with outside resources. So other agencies that provide the same thing. Um, we have a whole list because we cover 2 counties. So we have lists of resources for both counties, from food pantries to transportation to mental health to housing, you name it. We have a list of resources to share, and it's constantly growing and changing. Um, but what I really like is that we do have a lot of that available just right within. Like we have direct service workers that go out and do home visits. We have um, what they call psych it's we call it PR. It's psych rehab or something like that, and it's like a step down from being in therapy, where you can like kind of touch base with someone in the community every once in a while for mental health, and they connect you with different like organizations and activities and groups and things you can do. We have a drop-in center that people can take advantage of. So, it just, there's a lot that we can provide, whether through referrals or just within our agency.
Um, Krista, I want to ask you about something. So, what do you think about when it comes to mental health and drug abuse? Because I know going through and being someone who went through therapy and seeing psychiatrists as a kid, I still ended up having a drug addiction but it was when I stopped going to therapy and stopped seeing a psychiatrist. And as I became an adult years later and went back to get help, I ended up being able to stop doing drugs on my own because I had that sense of connection with someone to talk to and express my problems with.
And that's really, really common. Substance abuse disorder is part of the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic criteria that we use to diagnose people with whatever mental health um, they're diagnosed with. And there's cannabis use disorder. There's like each individual category of drug has their own disorder. It is definitely a mental health problem. And so that's why like therapy really is instrumental in helping, people who struggle with addiction recovering, being clean, having substantial clean time. Um, you know, there are lots of people that try to just cold turkey, I'll quit, I'll go through withdrawal, I'll medically detox, and I'll be okay. I don't need therapy. And more often than not, they're the ones that relapse. I used to work at a local hospital in the emergency department, specifically with drug and alcohol and mental health. And there were a lot of frequent flyers that we would see over and over and over again with drug and alcohol because they'd come into detox and then not go to therapy. And so they weren't breaking that cycle. They weren't getting the mental health support that they needed to stop the behaviors and to continue to stay clean. So there's definitely a big connection between the two. There's also, I think, like what plays a role in it too is there's a big mind body connection. And so if you're not addressing your mind and your body's craving something, you're going to listen to that and you're going to give in to whatever that is. So, you know, being engaged in therapy definitely is a game changer for people who struggle with addiction.
Mm. Thank you so much. I'm actually waiting for this episode to end and get aired so I can, because I attend a bunch of different NA meetings and sometimes AA meetings, and I would love to share this information with them.
What are some of your most common resources? What would you suggest? How if you if one of our listeners were like, okay, well, this is all great information, but how do I go about getting help? What would you suggest?
So, a couple of different things. If it's mental health that you're looking for, it's as simple as either A, if you have insurance, call that number on the back of your insurance card and say, hook me up with some therapists that accept my insurance. And then you call and you schedule an intake assessment. Um, you can also, like, just honestly, I found my therapist by doing a Google search of therapists in my area. And then I narrowed it down to what specifically I wanted to work on and the kind of therapist I wanted. There's a website called Psychology Today, and a lot of therapists are listed on there. And you can do a search down to gender, age range, what their focus is, what kinds of therapy they do, and put in your zip code, and it'll give you a list of therapists in your area. Um, I tell people about that a lot. As far as resources beyond mental health, and you're looking for other things, go to your county's Department of Human Services website. You know, you can just type it in there, like whatever your county DHS, and everything you need is there. Applications for low income housing, applications for like SNAP and ways to have food support, lists of food pantries and when they're open and what they have. Um, just anything you can think of, it's listed on your DHS website.
Okay. Jericho, do you have anything else that you want to ask or anything?
Nothing to ask, but I do have a comment to make. So, uh, Krista had mentioned that she herself has a therapist, and I think we stated this in the past, but since this is a different podcast for those who may be new listeners, there's still a stigma about therapy. Therapy isn't something for people who have problems or that someone who has something wrong. Therapy is for something for well-adjusted people, for people who don't realize that they need help, and for people who may not even be categorized as someone who traditionally needs help. It's for you to discover things about yourself and for you to better understand yourself. It could be something simple like better communication. It could be understanding your feelings better. It could be understanding who you are as a person and where you fit both in your own life and the lives of those around you. So, don't feel that it in any way diminishes you or sets you apart in such a way as to take away from who you are as an individual. And you should embrace therapy as, something normal in culture. Everyone can use it. It's a tool that's there and that should be used and that everyone can benefit. Um, if you ever tell somebody you meet somebody who claims that they don't need therapy or that they don't see the point in it, it's often because they simply have not seen the wisdom of what it can provide. And I'm not saying there couldn't be someone out there with it, because I was one of those people who didn't see its merits at first, but that's because I didn't understand that a lot of the things in my own life that I understood to be just who I was, part of what I consider to be my personality and thing, came from trauma responses, came from adaptations that my psyche and my mind had made to cope and to evolve to deal with the situations that I had been presented as a young person and growing into adolescence, and had so drastically shaped who I was as a person that only now in my as I'm reaching the midway point in my life that I now realize just how much I was affected by these points in my life in the past. And I was able to attain these realizations by going through therapy, and not even about those things. I went through a completely different reason initially, just because I was stressed out about work and some other things, and I wanted to see if it could help alleviate the stress that I was under. But I started asking questions and I started exploring myself, and it helped me to come in tune with a lot of things and just simply answer a lot of questions I had. So I would encourage our listeners to be open-minded and not let naysayers or uh, the culture of negativity that has been surrounding mental health for so many years keep you from seeking help from friends, family, and of course licensed therapists and practitioners.
I agree with all of that. I actually had said to my therapist about a year ago, like, life is really good right now. My mental health is in a really good place. I started therapy because I was literally in survival mode. My life was crazy. It was 4 or 5 years ago, and just had a lot going on and just needed a place that I could just go unload. And I definitely, my anxiety and my depression, I struggled a lot. I'm at a point now where all of my mental health is in a good place. So now I'm in therapy to learn how to thrive. I've figured out how to survive. Now I'm learning how to thrive and what to do with, and trusting that the good and all of that. And and you're talking about stigma with therapy. There's also a lot of stigma with mental health medication. And one of the things that I always say is, if you had diabetes, you would take insulin. If you had high blood pressure, you would take medication for that. Same thing with your brain. There's a chemical imbalance, and so you're taking medication to right that imbalance. It's the same idea. Like, why would you not want to make yourself feel as good as you could?
Just
Okay.
something to
Well,
add to it is that one thing about seeking mental help, going to a therapist, going to a psychiatrist, is that it makes you a better person, regardless of how good you are or how well you're doing in life. Everybody can progress more. Everybody can achieve more. And one thing about seeing a doctor is that it helps you learn more about who you are. Because there's a lot of things I didn't know about myself until I opened up and tried to discover who I was. So yes, getting help, going to different services, and getting help for your mental health is always a great choice.
okay. Krista, you said there was a book or something that you guys use to pull up the diagnoses and whatever for mental health, the ADA
Yes.
something.
Yes, it's
What
the
is it?
DSM-5
No, I don't know
diagnostic.
where ADA came from.
I don't know. But diagnostic statistical manual, and it's the 5th edition. So it's the DSM-5. And I'll be honest, when it comes to diagnosing, none of us really like to do it because no one fits perfectly into any one diagnostic box. But
Which is why
insurance
people like Jess have been diagnosed with several different things before they found the actual
diagnosis. Yeah,
diagnosis that she fits. Yeah.
right. And so really we use the DSM for, because insurance wants us to have a diagnosis so that they know what to pay for. Not that they get paid anything any different depending on what the diagnosis is. At least I don't think they do. They get paid by the amount of time the individual's in therapy. But insurance wants a diagnosis, so we do diagnoses. Sometimes it's pretty obvious, like, and it's pretty cut and dry. Sometimes, you're not sure and it's a lot of trial and error, and sometimes it changes. So, but yeah, like that's what we use. That's our guideline. And it breaks everything down into, to get a diagnosis of something, you have to have a certain number of different symptoms for it to qualify as that diagnosis. Uh, and it's different for everyone.
So, have you ever heard with or dealt with the EEOC?
It sounds like something I should know, but I don't know.
Jericho, Nichols, either of you know what the EEOC is?
EEOC. It
You say
I feel
definitely
like
sounds
he's
familiar.
okay. Nichols, what?
Did you say EOC?
EEOC.
Wait, I've seen it in my paperwork before. Hold on, I'm not sure.
I mean, are we talking about the Governmental Institute or are we talking about something different?
It is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
Okay,
Oh
yeah, so
yeah.
that's what you're talking about. Yeah, okay.
Okay, they're the ones that protect individuals with mental health conditions in the workplace.
I mean, they do a lot more than that, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Other organizations. What about OHCHR?
Nope.
These are a lot of abbreviations.
I was
I
gonna say
know,
that's a
right?
lot of alphabet soup. It sounds like something like the military.
Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Their
Yeah,
focus, their main focus, I guess, is protecting and promoting the rights of service users.
Hmm.
yeah, that one's a new one to me. I heard that one. The Highland of Fubar to Tubar. Gotcha.
What about MHA? I actually made that one up. It's actually just called Mental Health America.
Oh,
That was like,
I thought you was about the Florida Housing Authority for a second.
The Mental Health America advocates for the rights and full integration.
Integration?
There it is.
I was like, maybe you're trying to bring back segregation. That's a
Okay. Advocates the rights and full integration of people with mental health conditions. All right. And then what about WHO?
That's the World Health Organization.
yep.
Yay! What
I
do they
knew
do?
one.
What
Who?
did they do for mental health? Exactly.
Yep.
Who? What did
Doctor
they
Who.
do? What did they do? For mental health.
I do not know. I should know all of this, being that
You
I
should
work in
know
the
all of
field.
it.
I
The
probably learned it at one point.
The World Health Organization is who defined mental health as a basic human right. They're the ones that said that all of this needs to go. We need to do all of this for our human people with mental health disorders. Is it mental health disorders or mental health? Is it something else?
It just, yeah, mental health disorders. Um, we kind of have steered away from like mental illness, but that is what it is. It is, they are disorders, but it is illness. Just like, again, diabetes is an illness, high blood pressure is an illness. It's just all different organ systems of the body.
Because it's the brain, and the brain is an organ.
Right.
It's actually the most important organ we have, isn't it?
I mean, it's what
Well,
keeps us alive.
yeah, that's
I
what I
mean,
would think.
I only say that because they can take your heart out your body and replace your heart. They can replace everything in your body, kidneys, livers, but they cannot replace your brain.
Not yet. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
That
just
reminds
kidding.
me of Sheep's terrible joke.
Uh-oh, what is it?
Okay, let's hear it. What's the joke?
Okay, so there's this scientist, right? And he's trying to do some experiments with the human brain because you know how like your left side of your brain controls something different than your right side of your brain, right?
Uh-huh.
So he opens this guy's head up and he's like, all right, I want you to count to 10. So the guy goes, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. And he goes, all right. So he removes the left side of his brain. And he goes, all right, I want you to count to 10. And the guy goes, okay. And he goes, 1, 3, he goes, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And he's like, all right, interesting. So he writes it down, puts it back in. Then he removes the right side of his brain. He goes, okay, I want you to count to 10 again. And he goes, okay. And he goes, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So he's like, all right, interesting. So he writes that down and he goes, okay. So he removes both halves of the brain and he goes, okay, I want you to count to 10. And he goes, I can count to 10. I'm the greatest counter. Everyone says so. I have it on good authority. Teacher says I'm the best. No one ever counted like I have before.
Oh, man. That's a good one.
Okay. Well, that's
was a
going to
good
be it
one.
for today's podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, she hates Trump. I don't have a dog in that
Anyhow.
fight, but
Good on a high note.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss? Okay, well,
No,
I really don't have anything else.
I
So,
can't think of anything else. I mean, I could talk about the brain for hours, but that's not what we're talking about today. But because the brain's super
2027, new
cool.
topic.
The brain is super, super cool. Just the fact that trauma changes your neural pathways because of the cortisol levels in your brain, but with therapy and like things like meditation and mindfulness, you can actually rewire your brain. Like that's what trauma therapy does, is it rewires your brain back to baseline.
huh.
I know. It's so cool.
Okay, so if I was to call my insurance and tell them that I need trauma therapy, is that the words I use? Trauma brain therapy?
Yeah, you could just say trauma therapy. Yeah.
Okay, because see, reason why I say that for is because a lot of people don't know what kind of therapy they need. They know they need help, but they don't know what kind of help they need. Because a
Well,
person who needs help doesn't know. I mean, I know if I'm thirsty, I need water, but if I don't understand what's going on in my head, I don't know exactly what kind of help to ask for. So I could
well,
be
and
receiving the wrong type of help.
that's one of the things that the intake assessment is really great for is you call your insurance, you say, I want to get into therapy. They give you a list of therapists, you choose one, you go for your intake assessment and you say, look, I just know that I'm struggling with this, this, and this, and these are the things I want to focus on. And then you and your therapist kind of hash it out together. Therapy looks different for every single person. I work with school-aged kids. So pretty much my entire caseload has ADHD. But I approach it differently with every single one of them because it is different for every single one of them. Um, so, like you work with your therapist to decide like what are my goals? What do I want to work on? How do I want to get there? Do I want to address trauma right now or do I want to just deal with like my anxiety and depression and get those under control, knowing that the trauma is the underlying cause of those, but I can't do anything until I get them under control and I have good coping skills. And so you and your therapist work that out together and figure out what kind of therapy, what kind of interventions work best for you. And that honestly is one of my favorite parts of what I do is figuring out like the puzzle, like putting all the pieces together. Um, and being able to use the knowledge that I have, the lived experiences I have to help kind of, especially with these kids that are all over the place, bringing it together and getting it together and learning how to like manage their symptoms.
Another
Oh,
problem with I guess it's kind of easier dealing with kids, but when you're dealing with stubborn adults, is that they don't know how to open up and say what the actual problem is because going through assessment, they're going to ask you basic questions, but I don't think people understand is you have to be brutally honest when you're talking to your psychiatrist or when you're talking to your therapist. You cannot hold anything back because what you're holding back is probably what you need help with the most.
That's very true. I actually have a client right now that I'm working with that is very guarded. And it's going to take us a long time to get to the point where she's comfortable enough talking about her trauma and her grief. And it's going to be a while, but you just got to be patient and just keep building that rapport with your therapist. And, they all They all get there. I have a couple, well, a lot of my clients are very open with me, but a lot of like I have a few that are very guarded. It is different with kids though. Kids like have zero filter and they just kind of let it all fly. But I hear some really funny things. But for adults, and the thing is too is and I always tell my clients, you get out of therapy what you put into it. And so if you want to work really hard and we'll go through all of these things that you struggle with. Cool. If you have a day you don't want to work that hard and you just want to BS, we can do that too. This hour is your hour. You'll get out of it what you put into it. I'm here just as a tour guide to kind of help you along your way and work through your stuff.
Because me myself personally, I'm not sure how anyone else's experience goes, but if I leave a session and I haven't cried through half the session, it was not a good session. Most sessions I have with my psychiatrist, my therapist, I do a lot of crying and a lot of opening up because I'm relieving all the pain I'm holding in, and I'm letting somebody else help me carry this burden.
And that is awesome. That is amazing. That like I'm glad that you have that kind of rapport with your therapist that you can do that. And you just let it all out and you're utilizing that time that way.
So I have something I was thinking about like, oh, I don't really have anything else to talk about. And I was like, duh. I was just reflecting on stuff I was recently sharing with Lorelai. So I've always been an odd duck. And like when I was talking about unpackaging trauma, right? My little spiel I had a minute ago. One of the things I discovered about myself is I'm hyper aware. I posted a video, if anybody's curious about it, that I stumbled upon on YouTube that explains basically my this trait about myself to a T. And I've never met another person who's had this trait. I'm sure there's other people out there because they obviously made a video about it, that there's enough people to warrant it. But essentially what it is people like myself who are already are above average intelligence are put into a stressful situation and they take that intelligence instead of just normally applying it to scholastic endeavors or things like that, their body turns it into a defense mechanism where they start focusing on things like pattern recognition, and it becomes kind of like super empathy where they are able to dial into everything around them to a very high degree, and they sense people's patterns and changes in emotion, speech, mannerisms to a very, very high level. And um, it's kind of like a double-edged sword because it's you stay in this constant state of hyper awareness, so things never surprise you. You're never really caught off guard. People don't like sneak up on you. Um, you know what people are feeling before they know it. Like they are still processing how they feel, but you already know something's wrong, or can make the logical leap to what they're most likely having an issue about, or why they're upset about something, or you know. And it has all these kind of nifty little party tricks that come with it. But the problem is there's sort of this Achilles heel side of it where because you're constantly on edge, it's like being like an abused animal that's waiting to get hit all the time. You're you're so on guard that you have to numb everything else because all your senses are cranked to 11 all the time. And when everything else is numb, it makes it hard to be in the moment and enjoy things and live and experience things. And you don't even realize that you're living your life sort of on mute until you have moments of I wouldn't call them like reprieve per se, but it's just moments where your body is forced out of that state. For me, it happens like when I'm sick or if I have an extreme amount of stress to the point that my body is forced to divert its attention away from that hypersensitivity. Then I'll start to feel things that my body otherwise is muted to. So, for example, I love the cold, but I never get cold. So one of the reasons I enjoy the cold is my body's constantly running hot. Well, when I'm not in that state, my body's not running hot like a computer that's running too many programs at once, right? So then I start to actually feel the cold around me and I'll start shivering and I'll start putting on like layers and things like someone who's probably normal would do, right? Things like that. And I realized, that this is a self-defense mechanism that was developed from when I was younger because in order to avoid dangerous situations, I learned to anticipate people's moods and read when danger was around me. And I developed mannerisms that are associated with this hyper awareness. Like, for example, when I go to sit in a restaurant, I don't sit with my back to a door. I'm always sitting in a position where I have the most like opportunistic vantage point on the rest of the restaurant and the people around me. I'm closest to the most space or exit. I don't like being surrounded by people. And it's not that it bothers me to be close to someone or rub up against somebody, but instinctually, I want the freedom of movement. I want an escape route or I want the ability to just something. Or like, at dinner, you know, most people are having idle conversation, right? I'll be eating a steak, let's just say, and subconsciously my hand and my fingers will be moving over the knife and I'm adjusting position. I'm sure I'm trying to keep the knife in a balanced position that I can quickly move it into an attack or to like a stabbing or a defensive position in case the threat's there. And it's not like paranoia because I'm not afraid and I'm not worried. It's just like being a trained operative. You have to be aware and be ready at all times because you know that danger is omnipresent even when you're not in a dangerous situation is because it's what you've been trained to do. So I don't like think danger's around every corner, but I'm prepared and ready for danger to be around every corner. You know what I mean? So I don't live my life in a state of fear. I just live my life in a state of readiness. But it creates a lot of noise in my mind. So there's times where I have to drown out that noise if I need to concentrate on something or if I like trying to wind down, if I've had a lot going on, if there's like a lot of stress or something in my life, for example, I can't simply go watch a movie. Like I'll have people that like Lorelai will be like, well, if you're tired, just go to sleep. It's not that easy because if I'm now stressed out, like a normal person would be stressed out because of my hyper awareness, it's now been put on high alert. So my adrenaline flow isn't like a normal person's adrenaline that just comes and goes. It's just like a constant feed, like a drug. Like I may be exhausted, but the adrenaline pumping through my body simply will not allow me to sleep. I can lay there in bed with my eyes shut for 8 hours straight. It won't matter. I'll constantly be listening to all the sounds around me and at best I can try to like meditate or reach some sort of like non-movement based resting, but I won't ever reach REM sleep. I won't dream. The moment someone moves within that bubble around me, I'm going to stir because they've moved within that bubble, right? So it's a very interesting thing I found out that I didn't I've always known this is how I was, but I didn't realize that it was a product of trauma and a a side effect of the abuse I'd suffered from a young age. I just assumed it was another weird quirk I had being an individual that didn't really match a lot of the people around me.
That's really, really interesting. And there's so much to unpack with all of that. Because a lot of that is high cortisol levels and being in fight or flight. And like a lot of times we're in that fight or flight mode all the time without even realizing we are. Like we just get so used to that being the normal that once we're not anymore, we don't know how to behave and we don't know how to act.
Yeah, my fight or fight comes in into positions of authority. Like anytime I have to talk to my boss, not specifically the boss I'm under now, but like if my boss in any job tells me, "Hey, I need to talk to you in my office," instantly I'm under a panic mode. Like I don't feel panicked in the sense like I'm worrying about a whole lot, but my physical body remembers the trauma of being in trouble, and so it starts to panic. And even though I could be getting a praise and they're telling me we got, hey, you got a raise and you're doing a great job, in the back of my head, there's this sort of underlying fear that they're just setting me up for a bigger fall, that they're kissing my ass now, but later they're going to get rid of me or fire me or turn on me or whatever they're going to do. And so because I understand that I'm only useful to them now, that this isn't going to be a forever thing. Like my arms pits will get like super sweaty and start like drenching sweat. Like I'm just waiting for the boom to drop, right? Because when I was young, that's how it would work. Both my mom and my dad would do this pretend to be nice thing, and then out of nowhere, I'd get the shit whooped out of me, right? And so my mom did it because that was her sadistic way of tricking me. I don't know. I still don't know why she did it that way, but she did. And then my dad did it, but in his way, he didn't really trick me. It just, there were times where he'd be cruelly unfair. Like he would explain to me that it wasn't my fault in something, yet he had to punish me. And I was like, but why? If I didn't do anything wrong, why am I getting my fucking ass kicked? This doesn't make any sense. But I still get beat within an inch of my life because it was Tuesday, and apparently that's just what happened, right? So like in the back of my mind, I know there's no reason, or well, in the forward of my mind, I should say, my conscious mind, I know there's no reason to be afraid. And when push comes to shove, when the fight or flight is there in my conscious mind, I choose fight. Like I'm not intimidated by my boss. I will stand up and I'll be like, you can go fuck yourself. But like subconsciously, I can't help my body's reaction to things. And that was my very first trip into therapy, was I couldn't stop all these things that were happening to me. And I was having like tightness in my chest, and I was having these anxiety, I wouldn't call them attacks, but I was having this constant like stomach cramp and pain, and this overwhelming dread sort of build up and stress. And my concern was I was going to develop an ulcer. I've never had an ulcer, but being a diabetic, who the hell knows what I would develop, right? So that was my concern. I went to therapy to see if they could help alleviate that. And I realized that it was a trauma response that was causing this through therapy. And so I learned to sort of confront that younger self image and be like, I get why you're afraid, but we're not a child anymore. Like, I understand why you're afraid, but I'm here now. We are no longer this child who can't protect ourselves from the big mean people. I now can punch a bitch in the throat if they step up. We don't have to be afraid anymore. Right? And that's like a lesson I had to learn. And you think it'd be that easy just to tell yourself something like that, but it's not as simple as facts being enough, because I live my life by fact and figures. It's understanding it on an emotional level, that there's something primal inside you that's afraid, and you have to learn to overcome that.
Okay. Uh, I don't know how to segue out of that.
Well, I think it pinpoints the importance of having that right to mental health treatment and having the accessibility to it and being able to, take advantage of that and access it and having it readily available. Just like, you can go to your PCP if you're having an issue like with migraines or whatever, being able to go to your therapist because you're having an issue with panic attacks and trauma responses.
Okay, I think that really is going to be it for the podcast today. Again, oh, what if you don't have insurance, Krista? How can you find mental health if you don't have help if you don't have insurance?
Again, you can do an online search, just therapists near me. And a lot of therapists, if you don't have insurance, they therapy can be expensive, but a lot of therapists are willing to work on a sliding scale and meet you where you are financially, because it's that important that you get that connection and have that support and help. So there was a point in time where I was doing my therapy on a sliding scale like that, because my therapist didn't take the insurance I had, but I didn't want to change therapists. So, it's just a matter of finding the one that's a good fit and then working with them to be able to afford the cost of going.
Yeah, especially if you're young, if you're like a teen or an adolescent, they have a lot of programs that work with that because I had trouble paying for my son's therapy at first because it is very expensive, but they had sliding scales for him, and there's lots of options out there. You just need to look around.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank both of our guests for being here with us today. And thank the listeners for listening. And that's going to be it for today's podcast. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. But don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share. Bye, everyone. We'll see ya.
Bye.